Hey guys, and welcome back to the Central Buzz News. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, and the current time is 10:02 a.m. So just like yesterday, I'm actually just going to start at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to move my hand. I know if I go here, I'm going to be at 10:05, and I'm not quite that far. So I'm going to use my little marks in between. This will be 10:01, 10:02. So that's what that looks like. It is 10:02. So, our interesting fact today has to do with our math concept, which has to do with what I'm going to show you that you can make at home to help you with fractions. So, our interesting facts for today are actually about pizza, because when we work with fractions, one of the number one examples we think of is a pizza and cutting that into pieces, because normally if it's a normal size pizza, we're not eating the whole thing. It's cut into slices to share. So, here are some interesting facts about pizza. So, the first one is that the average pizzeria, and a pizzeria is like the Family Pizza Galley or Domino's or anywhere you would order pizza from, they use roughly 55 pizza boxes per day. Now, of course, that could be completely different depending on where it is. I'm sure a pizzeria at Disney World uses way more than 55 boxes because there's so many people there, as opposed to maybe the Pizza Galley in Bessemer City or the Domino's in Gastonia. So it just depends. But that's just a rough estimate of regular pizza restaurants. Some popular pizza toppings in Japan are squid and mayonnaise. It's actually called mayo jaga, and that is mayonnaise, potato, and bacon all put together. So that and squid are two popular toppings on pizzas in Japan. Now, that does not mean that every person in Japan likes squid on their pizza or mayonnaise or potato or bacon, but that's just something that seems to be very popular there. And then it says that 94% of Americans eat pizza regularly. So that is a lot of the population that eat it on a regular basis. And I also read that Saturday nights are the biggest night of the week for pizza sales. So those are just a few interesting facts about pizza. And we're actually going to move on to our math concept for today, which is a problem about pizza. Again, just like yesterday, I'm going to show you the problem. If you want to take a second just to pause it so you can see the problem, I'll just be reading it and working out here on my board. But we are actually looking at number 2 today on here. So number 2, if you want to take a pause, it says if Harrison eats 1/3 of a cookie and Eden eats 2/3 of another cookie of the same size, that's a really important detail, who has eaten the most cookie? So, what we're doing here is we are comparing fraction sizes. So, we have two people that are eating a cookie. They're the same size cookie, not one big cookie and one small cookie. They're the same size, but one person is eating 2/3 and one person is eating 1/3. So, what I did is I went ahead and on my board I put here 1/3 and 2/3. I put a box in the middle for my symbol that I'm going to use to show which one is greater than or less than, or if they're equal. But those, just to review quickly, are our symbols that we use to compare. So we will put 1 in this box when we figure it out. So there are a couple of ways to do this. The first way, and probably my favorite way, is to draw a model. But this can be very tricky if you do not know how the rules to making the model. And the number one rule to making the model is that both models need to be as close to the same size as possible. And when you're doing that freehand, that can be hard. So one thing I would suggest is to get an object that is round or whatever shape you're wanting to use and actually trace that object. I'm going to do that for you right now. I'm going to use the lid to my word jar here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trace this jar lid so that both of my models are about the same size. So that's not the easiest thing to trace, but I'm going to, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these two models into thirds, because both of them are split into thirds, which means they have 3 pieces. The easiest way I know how to do that evenly as possible is to make a peace sign. Look at this. So that's the easiest way I can tell to make thirds. Thirds are kind of hard because they're an odd number. So I'm going to go ahead and label. So I'm going to label an H for Harrison. That's his cookie. And I'm going to label, let's see what the other name was, Eden, for her cookie. Okay, so I have my models here. So going back to the problem, Harrison is only eating 1 piece of his. So I'm going to color in, shade in, 1 piece of the cookie. So that's how much he ate right there. And then Eden ate 2 thirds. So I'm going to shade in her 2 pieces. And then I'm going to compare them. I'm going to see which person ate more pieces. So it looks like Eden ate the most. So I would take my symbol and put it this way. 2 thirds, or really what we're saying is 1/3 is less than 2 thirds. 2 thirds is greater than 1/3. So as you can see here in my model, this made it super easy for me to tell which person ate the most cookie. But I did have to try very hard to get those models to be close to the same size. I didn't do perfect, but like I said, this jar lid was not the best thing for me to use. So whenever you're picking out something to trace, make sure you practice first and see that it works really well before you try it. So that is one way. And I want to also explain one other thing. Before I show you the other strategy, I want to explain one thing that's super important about fractions. I just feel like everybody should make sure that they understand when they're working with fractions. When we say the fraction 2 thirds, what we're saying is we've eaten 2 pieces that are the size of thirds. We have split this into 3 pieces, and there are 3 total pieces, but it's not just the fact that they're 3 total pieces. They are the size of a third. And when we look at this, 1/3 plus another third plus another third actually makes a whole. So 3 thirds equals a whole. So I just want you to remember this bottom, your denominator, is the size of the fraction. This is cut into thirds. The top is your numerator, and that's whatever you're doing with it, whether it's saying you're eating those pieces, you're giving them away, anything like that, or they're shaded in. That's what your numerator is for, but just remembering that that denominator is the size of a piece. So when we say 2 thirds, we're talking about 2 pieces, but not 2 whole pieces. We're talking about 2 pieces of a third, okay? So since we talked about that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you one other strategy, and that is the number line. So I'm going to draw a number line. Okay, and I made them the same size because that's super important. And when I label parts of my number line, I'm going to make sure that I line them up. Okay, so you can see that when I made my lines here, I made sure that they lined up perfectly underneath each other so everything's the same. We're going to start at 0. So if I look at this number line, I actually have this split into 1, 2, 3 pieces. I'm not counting the lines. I'm counting the actual pieces I see. So 1, 2, 3, this is broken into thirds. When I am here, I've taken up no pieces at all. I haven't went anywhere. This is kind of like the ant that walks the city blocks. He's walked nowhere. We're at 0. That's going to be 0 out of 3. And again, that's 0 pieces out of the size of third pieces right there. This is not whole pieces, this is thirds. This next line would be 1/3, then 2 thirds, and the magic thing that always happens at the end, 3 thirds should be where I am because that equals 1 whole number line. All these little pieces added up to be 1 whole. That's how I always check myself in the end to know that that is where I should end up. So then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the bottom. All right, and now I'm going to switch colors on my marker, and I'm going to label. So there was Harrison, his line's going to be on top, and then Eden was at the bottom. So I put an E there. Okay, so Harrison ate one piece, so he actually stopped here. He ate this piece and stopped at that 1/3. Eden didn't stop at 1/3. She went all the way to 2/3. So when I look at that on there, I can see that her amount takes up way more space on the number line than Harrison's does up here. So that is another way that I can look and say, okay, this one takes up more space. It went farther on the number line. This is the bigger fraction. So a lot of people use this strategy as well to compare these fractions. So that is our problem for today. And probably for the next couple of days, we're really going to be focusing on comparing fractions. Today, these fractions had like denominators. That means that each person split the same size cookie into the same size pieces. So it's a little easier when we're doing that because they're the same size. So if Harrison and Eden are eating the same size pieces, but Harrison's only eating one and Eden's eating two of those same size pieces, she's eating more because two is bigger than one. So again, we have to really visualize, just like in word problems with fractions. I'm always going to say that. And so models are super important. Even if you don't use the model to fully answer the question, just drawing it to see it will help a lot. And like I said, you also have the option of doing the number line to also be able to compare those fractions. So the last thing that we're going to do today, so we don't have a guest today, I'm going to show you how to make your own pizza fraction sets. So what I did was I cut the center out of 2 paper plates. Now I only did that because my paper plates had like some design around it and it just didn't look like pizza. So I cut that off. But if you have plain white paper plates, then yours should be fine. So they're almost about the same size, and I'm going to first make a half. I want to see how big of a fraction a half is. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to fold it in half as evenly as possible. And then I'm going to open it up so I can see that a half is pretty big. If I'm getting one large pizza and I'm only sharing with one person, we're each going to get a pretty big piece. Then I'm going to take a marker, a pencil, a crayon, something, and I'm going to split that piece so I can see. And then after that, I'm just going to decorate my pizza. So I like pepperoni pizza. So I'm going to just decorate. You might want to color your cheese on here, maybe put some bacon, whatever kind of pizza you like. And I'm going to just decorate my pizza. Mine would look more pizza-ish if I had the cheese colored on there, but just to show you, I'm just going to do this. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I label these. Because if I cut them apart to compare, I want to be able to know that this is the size of a half. Okay, so that's what that looks like. So now I'm going to take my other one and I'm going to make a fourth now. So when I make a fourth, I'm going to have to start with the half because I want this to be equal and even so that I can really compare the pieces. So I know that 4 is a multiple of 2, so I know this will work. I know I can start with a half to make a fourth. That's really important to know. I can also make an eighth out of that and keep going with multiples of 2 or 4, and that's a way to make them even. So, but we're just going to go to fourths. So I'm going to do the same thing I just did. I'm going to start with a half. Now, I'm not going to stop here this time because I'm wanting to see fourths. So the next thing I'm going to do to make this even is I'm going to take this over and I'm going to fold that half in half. And when I do that and open it up, I have 4 equal pieces. So again, I'm going to take my marker or pencil, crayon, whatever you have, and I'm going to divide that where I folded it so I can see the pieces, okay? And then I might take my marker, and this time I'm just going to draw little tiny marks for bacon. Again, my pizza's not going to look really realistic, but you, I'm sure, will make yours look like real pizza. So I have decorated my pizza. Now I'm going to label my pieces. If you were in 3rd grade at BCC, we did this very similar thing with fraction sets with pieces of paper. So this is the same thing. We're just kind of doing it with a circle instead of a square piece of paper. So now I have fourths. So ultimately what I would want to do is I want to cut these apart so that I have the pieces to be able to compare. And you're going to need a baggie to keep up with all of your pieces. And again, I could double up this fourths and make eighths and keep going. So think about that when you're making your fraction sets, what all ones you want to have, so that you'll have lots of them to be able to compare. So just to test this out real quick, and if you're really good at this, one thing that you could do is you could quiz brother and sister, mom and dad, and then you could actually teach them and show them with the pieces, because now you kind of have your own little teacher pieces to help people understand fractions. So if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, I already know this, I already know how to do this, then definitely still make this and help out people who don't know this, because this is a really good tool for you to use. So I'm just going to pretend like I'm quizzing somebody. And I'm going to look at these two fractions. I'm going to compare a half and a fourth. Okay? Just by looking at them, I'm thinking to myself, well, a 4 is a bigger number than a 2, but I have to think about what this actually means. This means one piece of the size of a half. And I want you to think back to how big that half was when we looked at it a second ago. And we're going to get the models out in just a second. And then this actually means one piece of the size of a fourth. So in retrospect, what we're thinking about is we're thinking about sharing a pizza, a cookie, an ice cream bar, a candy bar, whatever you can think of. We're either going to share it with 2 people or we're going to share it with 4 people. And we know that the more people we share with, the smaller the pieces are going to get. So I have those, and all I have to do now, I don't have to draw a model or a number line because I've made a fraction set. I'm just going to take a half and I'm going to take a fourth. Which piece is bigger? I'm going to give you just a second to answer. If you said a half, you are correct. The half is way bigger than this fourth. So I would take my symbol and I would face it towards the half, which means that a half is greater than 1/4, or 1/4 is less than 1/2. And just for fun, I'm going to do one more. This is a good one if you're trying to teach somebody, they're not sure yet. They may not be an expert like you yet. Let's try this. 1/2 or 2/4. Again, that 4 can throw some people off because it looks like a big number, and actually there's 2 pieces of the size of a fourth now, so I'm not really sure just by looking if I'm thinking about eating a certain amount or comparing. I'm not really sure. So I'm going to take my fraction set and I'm going to see. So I'm starting out with a half, but this time instead of just one piece of a fourth, let me switch pieces here. It's wanting me to compare 2. So if I do that, what do you notice about that? These are actually equal. They are equivalent. They are different sizes, but since we have 2 of these, it actually makes up the same size as a half. And that is something that you can tell with your fraction set. And we're going to use the equal symbol, which means equivalent, which means they take up the same amount of space or the same size, all of those things. So I hope that you will make a fraction set of your own. And remember, if you don't have paper plates or your mom or dad don't want you to use the paper plates for this, you can use square paper and you can use notebook paper, any kind of paper, and you can fold, starting with a half and making halves, folding the paper in half and doing it with a square paper. But I just thought the pizza looked kind of cool, and I think I'm going to go back and color in some cheese on mine so it looks more real. But I hope you guys can use this strategy, and we will be talking about fractions more as the weeks go on. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.